Martha believed that a grandmother's love was an unshakable sanctuary until her grandson, Mason, transformed her home into a battlefield of silence and contempt. Amidst insults and dishes thrown on the floor, a forgotten suitcase in the attic held a secret capable of destroying what remained of the family, or healing wounds none of them dared to name. This is not just a story about abuse, but about the exact moment when hatred tires of fighting and reveals the pain that fuels it. The grandfather clock in Martha's living room struck 6 in the morning with an insistence that seemed to echo the emptiness of her days. The metallic, rhythmic sound had been her only faithful companion since her husband, Arthur, had left 5 years earlier. Martha, 72 years old and with hands marked by time, was already in the kitchen. The ritual was always the same: grinding the coffee beans by hand, feeling the strong aroma fill the air, and watching the first rays of Ohio's sun touch the apple trees in the yard. But that autumn, the air inside the house felt colder than outside. It wasn't the weather, it was Mason's presence. Mason had arrived 3 months ago, brought in a luxury car that barely stopped at the entrance. His son, Stephen, had barely gotten out of the vehicle to hug his mother. He simply unloaded 2 large suitcases, handed over an envelope with a few dollars, and left, claiming that the boy needed field discipline. Since then, Martha's house, once a haven of peace and the smell of fritters, had become hostile territory. The sound of heavy, uneven footsteps coming from upstairs made Martha hold her breath. She set the table with almost sacred care. She used the lace tablecloth she saved for special occasions and made pancakes with honey, just the way Stephen liked them when he was young. She believed, with the naivete typical of grandmothers, that food was a bridge. Mason entered the kitchen. At 19, he was the very image of neglect. Disheveled hair, deep dark circles under his eyes, and a hunched posture, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't say good morning. He pulled the wooden chair so hard that the sound of it scraping against the floor seemed like a cry for help. Martha shuddered. "The coffee's fresh, Mason. I made pancakes. I used honey from Mr. Miller's farm," she said softly, trying to maintain her composure as her hands searched for something to hold on to on the counter. Mason looked at the plate, as if it were a personal insult. "I already told you I don't eat this garbage, Martha. It's pure fat and sugar. You want to kill me quickly to get rid of the problem. Is that it?" "Oh, darling, it's just a little treat. You hardly ate at dinner yesterday. You're getting thin. Your eyes are sunken. I'm worried. Darling." Mason let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Don't call me that. You don't even know me. You took me in because you didn't have the courage to say no to your perfect son, Stephen. But the truth is, you hate me as much as he does. I'm the family's mistake, aren't I? The kid who didn't make it in school, who doesn't want to go to college, the trash nobody wants around." Martha felt a pang in her chest, a physical pain that made her put her hand to her heart. "That's not true. You are my blood. I've loved you since the day I first saw you in that hospital in Chicago." Mason stood up abruptly. He picked up the pancake plate and, with a slow, deliberate movement, tilted it across the floor. The honey trickled down like a golden tear, and the fluffy batter fell onto the old wood, soiling the carpet that Martha cleaned so diligently. "Look what you've done," he said, with cruel irony. "Now you have something to complain about to your church friends. Oh, my grandson is a monster. That's what you want, isn't it? To validate your role as a martyr." Martha didn't react with screams. She picked up a cloth, knelt down with difficulty, and began to clean up the mess. Her joints cracked, and Mason just watched, arms crossed, her breathing heavy. "You should be ashamed," he continued, raising his voice. "You live in this huge house, alone, surrounded by old junk and mementos of people who are dead. You know what I would do? I would sell it all. Every plate, every painting. I would turn this old stuff into money and disappear. You're stuck in the past, Martha, and you want to drag me down with you. I just want you to be happy, Mason." "Lies!" he shouted, kicking the bucket of cleaning supplies Martha had brought. The dirty water splashed all over the kitchen. "You want me to be the perfect grandson so you can feel like a good grandmother. But I'm not. I'm a reflection of what this family really is. A sham." He slammed the kitchen door shut, and soon after, Martha heard the front door slam against the frame. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. Martha sat there on the damp floor, staring at her own wrinkled fingers. She felt small, insignificant. The grandson she so longed to embrace was a wall of thorns. She spent the rest of the morning in a trance of sadness. To occupy her mind and escape the feeling of uselessness, she decided it was time to tackle the attic. She needed to organize the winter boxes. The cold was coming, and she knew Mason didn't have proper clothes. Stephen had sent him off with only band t-shirts and ripped jeans. The attic was a place of shadows and dust suspended in the light, filtering through the roof tiles. Martha began opening cardboard boxes, finding photo albums and Arthur's clothes. Then, at the back of a built-in closet under a blue tarp, she found something she hadn't seen in years, a worn brown leather suitcase with the initials A engraved in metal. It was the suitcase Stephen had used when he left home for college, and which he brought back years later on a quick visit, asking his mother to keep it for a while. Martha hesitated. She had always respected her children's privacy, but something in that moment, a mother's intuition that never fails, compelled her to unzip the bag. Inside, there were no luxury clothes or business documents. There were open envelopes, eviction notices in the names of Mason and his biological mother, and a series of medical reports. As Martha read the first few lines, she felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her hands began to tremble so violently that the papers sounded like dry leaves in the wind. She discovered that while Stephen flaunted a successful life in Chicago with his new wife, Mason and his mother had spent the last 2 years living in roadside motels and makeshift shelters. Stephen had cut off financial support months before sending his son off to the farm. But the worst part wasn't the poverty. The worst part was the unsent letters Mason had written to his father, found tucked into a torn diary at the bottom of his suitcase. "Dad, please, she's sick. Don't leave us here. Dad, I don't need money. Just come see us." Martha realized that Mason's aggression was innate evil. It was a protective shell, an armor built upon utter neglect. He didn't hate her for being old. He hated her because she represented the family that had left him to bleed in the dark while keeping up appearances. She heard the sound of an old car engine outside. Mason was back, but he wasn't alone. Through the attic window, Martha saw 2 suspicious-looking young men standing by the gate, talking to Mason in hushed tones. One of them handed Mason something small, which he quickly put in his pocket. Martha's heart raced. Her grandson was getting involved with danger, and she was the only person in the world who knew why he was self-destructing. Martha's hand still gripped the yellow papers when the back door slammed against the wall, a crash that seemed to crack the very structure of the house. She stood motionless in the attic, her chest rising and falling in spasms of anxiety. Those letters and court notices were like fragments of a broken mirror, reflecting a reality she, in her quiet country life, had never dared to imagine. Her son, the successful Stephen, was not the man she had raised. He was a stranger who had allowed his own blood to live in misery. Downstairs, Mason's steps were erratic. Martha put the documents back in the suitcase with an agility she didn't know she still possessed, zipping it shut tightly. She descended the spiral staircase carefully, step by step, trying to control her breathing so as not to reveal her discovery. Upon reaching the kitchen, she found Mason frantically rummaging through the drawers. "Where is it?" he shouted, without even looking at her. "I know Grandpa had a box of old coins or some money saved for emergencies. Where are you hiding it, Martha?" "Mason, what's going on? Who are those boys outside?" Martha asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though her legs were trembling. Mason turned abruptly. His face was red, and there was a glint of despair and fury in his eyes that broke Martha's heart. "It's none of your business. I need money. Now. I'm not going to stay stuck in this hole while life passes me by. Those guys can get me out of here, but they don't work for free. Are you trying to run away? Where to, my grandson? You have nowhere to go but this house. Anywhere is better than here." He kicked the trash can, scattering the remains of his breakfast across the clean floor. "I hate this musty smell. I hate the ticking of this clock. And I hate the way you look at me, like I'm an abandoned puppy. Give me the money, or I'll start smashing everything you value in this room." Martha walked to the table and sat down, keeping her eyes fixed on his. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Mason picked up a blue porcelain vase, a wedding gift from Martha, and raised it above his head, ready to shatter it. "You can break it, if that's what fills the void your father left," she said calmly. Mason's hand hesitated in midair. His father's name sounded like a trigger. "Don't talk about him. You don't know anything. You live in this bubble of perfection. Stephen is your pride and joy, the big businessman from Chicago, isn't he? He's a monster, and you're his mother, which makes you just like him." "I was in the attic, Mason," Martha revealed, her voice almost a whisper. "I saw the suitcase. I saw the letters. I read about the evictions. I saw how much you begged him not to leave you in that shelter." The vase slipped from Mason's hands, falling onto the velvet sofa without breaking, but the emotional impact was far greater. The young man seemed to wither. The armor of aggression began to crumble, revealing the wounded child beneath. He leaned against the counter, his breath coming in short sobs that he desperately tried to suppress. "So now you know," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You know I'm trash," he discarded. "My mother, she got sick because she didn't have enough to eat, so I could have a meal a day, and he was there at gala dinners, appearing in magazines. I tried to be good, Martha. I tried to work. I tried to help, but hunger and fear mess with your head. And now you look at me and see exactly what he sees, a mistake that needs to be hidden." "I don't see a mistake." Martha stood and took a step toward him. "I see a survivor. I see my grandson, betrayed by the very person who should have protected him. Why didn't you tell me, Mason? Why carry all this hatred alone?" "Because the truth hurts more than a lie," he shouted. But this time there was no threat, only agony. "If I accepted that you are good, I would have to accept that he is evil. And it hurts too much to know that my own father hates me so much that he wants to see me starve. It's easier to hate you because you're here. It's easier to blame the old woman on the farm than to face the fact that I have no one in the world." Martha tried to approach him to touch him, but Mason recoiled, exiting to the side door that led to the barn. He needed space, and she knew it, but time was running out. Those men Martha had seen at the gate weren't Mason's friends. They had predatory looks, the kind of look that seeks out vulnerable young men for dirty work. Afternoon waned, bringing a dense fog that enveloped the apple trees. Martha didn't stand still. She picked up the old telephone on the wall and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. While the line rang, she looked at Stephen's photo on the wall. With a decisive gesture, she turned the picture frame upside down. "Detective Miller, this is Martha. I need a favor. No, it's not about the fence. It's about my grandson, and about some strangers who are hanging around my property. But before you come, I need you to do a search for a name in Chicago." Meanwhile, in the barn, Mason sat on bales of hay, clutching a small package the men had given him. It was a loyalty test. If he delivered it to the neighboring town, he'd get a seat in their car and a promise of easy money. His fingers fiddled with the plastic wrapping. The smell of earth and hay reminded him of when he was little and visited his grandmother before everything went wrong. A lone tear trickled down the dirt on his face. He was on the edge, teetering on the thin line between redemption and the abyss. The light from a pair of headlights illuminated the entrance to the farm. It wasn't the sheriff's car. It was the men returning to get answers from Mason. And inside the house, Martha held the leather briefcase, ready to use it as a real weapon, not made of metal, but of evidence. Understood. Let's maintain the emotional intensity, but with a more agile and direct pace for the next segments. The headlights of the black car cut through the fog, stopping just a few meters from the barn. Mason felt his heart pound against his ribs. In his pocket, the plastic package felt like it was burning his skin. He knew that if he crossed that gate with those men, there would be no turning back. It would be the end of Martha's grandson and the birth of something he feared becoming. Inside the house, Martha watched the scene through the gap in the curtain. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she picked up her leather bag and walked the porch. The creaking of the wood under her feet caught Mason's eye, and he froze when he saw his grandmother there, small and frail, but with a posture he had never seen before. "Mason!" her cry cut through the cold air. "Come here now." One of the men got out of the car. He was tall, wearing a worn leather jacket and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The boy's busy, ma'am. We have some business to discuss. Go inside before you catch a cold." "The only business you have here is with the police, who are already on their way," Martha lied, her voice as firm as steel. "And you, Mason, if you take one more step toward that car, you'll be choosing the same cowardly path as your father. He ran away from his responsibilities. Are you to run away from your own life?" Mason looked at the man, then at his grandmother. The conflict on his face was heartbreaking. "You don't understand, Martha. I have nothing. They promised me a way out. They promised you a cell." Martha stepped down the first step of the balcony, lifting the suitcase. "Inside here is the proof that your father committed fraud against you and your mother. I just spoke with a family lawyer. He didn't know half of this. Stephen hid everything. If you stay, we'll fight. If you go, he wins. He'll say you were just a criminal. He tried to help." The man in the leather jacket stepped forward impatiently. "Enough small talk, kid. Get in the car or drop the package here. We don't have all night." Mason looked at the package in his hand. The weight of those choices seemed to crush him. He remembered the smell of the morning pancakes, Martha's care for his wound, and the deafening silence of his father's abandonment. In a sudden movement, he threw the package back into the car, but didn't move toward it. "I'm not going anywhere," Mason said, his voice hoarse. The driver growled an insult and sped off, tires screeching on the gravel driveway, disappearing into the darkness. Mason fell to his knees on the damp grass, covering his face with his hands. Silence returned to the farm, broken only by the distant sound of siren that, this time, was real. Martha approached slowly. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply placed her hand on her grandson's shoulder. For the first time in months, Mason didn't flinch. He leaned against her and wept a loud, deep cry, as if he were expelling years of pent-up poison. The siren of Sheriff Miller's patrol car cut through the silence of the road, but the men in the black car had already vanished into the darkness. Martha didn't move. She remained there, under the pale light of the porch, holding Mason's shoulder as he sobbed. The boy, who hours before had been shouting insults and breaking plates, now looked like a lost child, collapsed on the damp Ohio grass. "They'll be back, Martha. I owe them," Mason stammered through tears, his voice muffled by sobs. "I took money up front to try and buy a bus ticket. I just wanted to disappear." Martha squeezed his shoulder with a force that surprised them both. "No one will take you out of this house, Mason. Not those men, not your father, and certainly not your past. I called Miller not to arrest you, but to ensure you have protection." The officer stepped out of the patrol car, the flashing lights painting the apple trees red and blue. He looked at the young man on the ground and then at his old friend. Martha made a discreet gesture, asking for silence. She knew the law needed to act, but Mason's heart needed something no badge could give: justice. "Come in, Mason. Go wash your face," Martha ordered, with sweet authority. When the boy entered, shuffling his feet, Martha handed the suitcase to the officer. "Miller, open the third compartment. There are documents from a trust account my husband left for Mason. Stephen forged his son's signature to drain the fund when the boy was still a minor. That's why they became homeless." The detective flipped through the papers under the flashlight, his expression hardening with each page. "Martha, this is a federal crime. If this is true, your son won't just lose his reputation. He'll go to jail. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Martha looked out the kitchen window, where she saw Mason's figure sitting at the table, his head bowed. She remembered the broken vase, the pancakes on the floor, and, above all, the look of abandonment her grandson carried. "Stephen died for me the moment he let that boy go hungry while he ate from golden plates. Do what needs to be done." The night wore on heavily. Martha made chamomile tea and sat down at the table with Mason. The silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of war, but that of fragile truce. Mason looked at his own hands, his fingernails dirty with grease and soil. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, without looking at her. "After everything I said, after how I treated you, I was a monster to you." "You weren't a monster, Mason," Martha replied, serving the tea. "You were merely reflecting the pain you received. Love is like this land out here. If you only throw poison, nothing grows. But if you clean up the dirt, the flowers return. I don't see what you did. I see who you can be." Mason took a sip of tea, the warmth of the cup warming his cold hands. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to run away, but deep down, a doubt still gnawed at him. How could he look to the future if the blood that ran in his veins came from a man who betrayed him? Suddenly, the phone on the wall rang. It was Stephen. The screen lit up with the word son. Martha looked at the phone, then at Mason. The climax of that entire journey was just a touch away. The phone rang with metallic insistence, cutting through the kitchen silence like a knife. Martha and Mason stood frozen, their eyes fixed on a vibrating device on the wall. The name Stephen glowed on the screen, a vivid reminder of all the pain that had brought them there. Martha reached out her hand, but hesitated for a second. She looked at her grandson, seeking silent permission. Mason nodded slightly, his knuckles white from gripping the teacup tightly. She complied and put it on speakerphone. "Hello, Mom." Stephen's voice was hurried, polished, with that tone of someone who's always closing a deal. "Listen, Miller called me saying nonsense about a suitcase and old documents. I don't know what Mason told you, but he's a compulsive liar. He probably forged those papers to try and extort money from me. Send him away now. I'll send a driver to pick him up and take him to a rehab clinic. He's freaking out." Martha felt a chill run down her spine, but not from fear. It was a cold, crystalline indignation. "He didn't tell me anything, Stephen. I found the suitcase. I read the letters you never answered. I saw the photos of your ex-wife whom you left to wither away without medical help." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Stephen's breathing became audible, heavy. "Mom, you don't understand business. I had to make choices. The world out there is cruel. I gave him a chance on the farm, didn't I?" Mason stood up slowly. He approached the phone, his face bathed in the yellow light of the kitchen. His voice was low, but full of a force Martha hadn't yet heard. "You didn't give me a chance, Dad. You threw me away because I was a reminder of who you used to be before the money. But you know what? Grandma taught me something today that you'll never understand." "Mason, is that you?" Stephen stammered. "Listen, son, we can talk. I can send you money, lots of money." "Save your money for the lawyers," Mason interrupted, with a chilling calm. "Because I'm not that scared kid from the shelter anymore. I have a home now, and I have a family that can't be bought with checks." Martha hung up the phone. The silence that followed was no longer oppressive. It was liberating. Mason looked at his grandmother, and for the first time in 3 months, a shy, genuine smile appeared on his face. He stepped forward and awkwardly enveloped Martha in a hug. She was small in his arms, but she felt like a mountain of security. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he whispered against her hair, "for everything, for the words, for the vase, for not seeing who you really were." "It's over, my dear," Martha replied, patting him lightly on the back. "Now let's clean this kitchen. We have a lot of work ahead of us if we want to prepare the land for spring." The following morning dawned with a clear sky, tinged with a blue the farm hadn't seen in weeks. The sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen no longer carried the tension of a battlefield, but the tranquil rhythm of a new beginning. Mason came downstairs early, wearing an old flannel shirt that had belonged to his grandfather, Arthur. He didn't wait to be called. He grabbed a broom and began to gather the pieces of the vase he himself had broken the night before. Martha watched him from the doorway, holding 2 porcelain mugs. She saw her grandson carefully bend down, treating each piece of glass with the respect one gives to something sacred. When he finished, he looked at her and extended his hand, receiving the coffee with a silent nod. They didn't need many words. The request of forgiveness was etched into every gesture of Mason's service. "The lawyer called, dear," Martha said, sitting down on the porch bench. "Your father tried to freeze the accounts, but Detective Miller acted quickly. The truth about the trust fund is protected. You'll have enough to study, to take care of your mother, and to start your own life, far from a shadow." Mason sat beside her, gazing at the horizon where the apple trees were beginning to lose their last autumn leaves. "I don't want to leave now, Grandma. I've spent so much time running away from places that hated me that I've forgotten what it's like to be in a place that loves me. If you'll accept me, I'd like to help take care of the farm this winter. I want to learn how to fix that fence and prune the trees." Martha felt a warm tear roll down her face, but it was a tear of relief. She took her grandson's callous hand and squeezed it between her own. "This house has always been yours, Mason. It was just waiting for you to find your way back." The following months were filled with hard work and healing silences. Mason discovered that strength didn't come from aggression, but from the patience to watch a seed sprout. He rebuilt what he destroyed, brick by brick, and Martha, with her quiet wisdom, rebuilt the young man's heart, precept by precept. The story of the elderly woman mistreated by her grandson became, in the small town, the story of the young man who saved his grandmother from loneliness and of a grandmother who saved her grandson from the abyss.